what we put in our mouth and our gut is going to affect what's going on in our gut and in our brain. Basically, antibiotics, things like that, NSAIDs, ibuprofen, Tylenol, a lot of these actually alter the gut microbiome. And that's going to affect how our gut communicates with our brain. And actually, our gut communicates more with our brain than our brain to our gut. So it really is that gut-brain connection.
Hey, I'm Brooke Jean, therapist, recovering perfectionist, and struggling working mom on a mission to normalize normal. If you're an overwhelmed, high-achieving, and secretly anxious mama, struggling to balance it all and on the brink of burnout, you are in the right place. Here is where we talk about hard things like balancing work and family life, mental health, and how to navigate life-altering transitions. Nothing is too taboo here. In my conversations, I'll teach you how to let go of who you think you're supposed to be in order to create the life you've always wanted. Get ready to embrace your messy, shed the shoulds, and find freedom through a life unperfected. This is the Unperfected Pod. Welcome back, everybody, to the Unperfected Pod, where we normalize normal and find freedom through a life unperfected. I am thrilled to be having this conversation today with Audrey Stimpson. You guys, if you've been listening along on the podcast, you know that this working mama has been struggling big time with energy and mood and all the things. And while there for a moment, I was just processing and throwing a fit, I am coming out of the darkness and ready to start having conversations so I can begin to research getting to root cause so I can help myself. And so today, Audrey Stimpson is here, you guys. She is a certified functional nutrition counselor, and she is going to have a juicy conversation about getting to root causes of our health and our well-being. So Audrey, thank you for taking the time to have this conversation with me today.
I'm so glad to be here. This is very exciting. Thank you.
Yes. We're going to be keeping it real, my friend. So let me first introduce Audrey formally, and then we will get into her story and the questions. So Audrey Stimpson is a certified functional nutrition counselor specializing in ADHD, autism, autoimmune, hormonal imbalances, and gut-brain health. I feel like check for most of us. Originally an internationally published master fashion photographer by trade, Audrey has now made it her sole mission to share her story of overcoming a 23-year Adderall dependence using a functional nutrition approach with focus on gut healing. Audrey truly believes that in healing our gut-brain connection and focusing on the root cause, we can live a life free from stimulants, brain fog, pain, and IBS. Audrey grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, the home of the blues. She received her bachelor's in photography from the University of Memphis and master's in fashion photography from the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. She later received her certification in functional nutrition from the Functional Nutrition Alliance. As a certified functional nutrition counselor, Audrey is coaching others on their journey towards freedom from stimulants as well as others struggling with ADHD, autism, autoimmune, hormonal imbalances, and debilitating chronic health conditions due to poor gut health. Featured on Channel 5 News, the High Vibe Podcast, Fearlessly Authentic Podcast, Rebellious Reinvention Podcast, On the Grow Podcast, the ADHD Women's Podcast, Close the Chapter Podcast, the Mom Feed Podcast, the 15-Minute Matrix Podcast, the Soul Rising Podcast, Dr. Sylvia K Podcast, Core Women Podcast, Now This Podcast, and Memphis Health and Fitness Magazine. Welcome to the show. You've been having some conversations, girl. You're getting your message out there.
More people need to know.
Yes. Okay. So how interesting that you started out in this fashion photography and made a major pivot in your career that sounds like was really personal based on your own health. Let's start with your story. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into functional nutrition.
So, I was a fashion photographer in New York. I have ADHD, and I was diagnosed at age 7. I was on medication for that for 23 years. And due to that, I started to be prescribed other medications to deal with the debilitating side effects of anxiety, depression, and other things that were compounded by taking stimulants for so long. And then I just got really sick. I wasn't processing food anymore. I ended up in the hospital for the third time. And I knew that my relationship with my medication, my stimulants, Adderall, and other medications that I was on to help combat those effects, that I needed to quit or I was going to die. I really felt like I couldn't do it anymore. And so I healed myself using what I didn't know at the time was a functional approach, by looking at all of the things and not just diet, not just lifestyle, not just trauma, not just stress, but all of the things together. And I started by removing myself from the stressors, and then, slowly healing my gut, addressing my trauma, addressing my stress, addressing my sleep, doing the right blood work, doing the right gut healing. And I went back to school because I then really wanted to share how I did that, and also help other people that are being told that they're okay, being told that it's normal to be tired all the time and that their blood work is fine. And I think that more people need this information, and I wish that I'd had it when I was going through this. So yeah, functional nutrition is about looking at the whole person and not just one thing. It's about inflammation, the epigenetics, the lifestyle factors, and the genetics. And so I'm using all of those tools as a functional nutrition counselor in Memphis, Tennessee, to help others, as well as those online. So that's my why. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so where did you start? It sounds like you made the decision, I want to get off stimulants, but was it with the cleaning up your gut? Like, what were some of those initial steps that you took to get yourself onto this more holistic path toward healing?
So I removed myself from the stressors first. A lot of times people want to go straight into removing and doing all these things. And like the one thing that is really like underlying is the stress. Obviously we can't remove all of our stress. I'm now a mom, and so I understand that like we can't just send our kids off and be like, goodbye. Like,
We'll pray for you.
Yeah, exactly. We have to deal with some levels of stress, but kind of recognizing what it is that we need to remove ourselves from so that we can help our hormones. Because too much stress, too much cortisol, that decreases our thyroid hormone. We can't actually convert T4 to T3, which thyroid affects so many different things in our body, including our metabolism, our energy, all the things. So our hormones, our neurotransmitters, all of this is affected by our stress. So removing ourselves from those stressful triggers first, starting to meditate, building a practice, building a routine in the morning, building a routine at night, having these rituals. And then I went about doing a gut healing reset. I actually found Tandy Gutierrez. She had a thyroidectomy and celiac, and she healed herself using a reset. So I started with that. I started like doing a gut reset, eliminating the inflammatory, adding in nutrients where there's deficiencies, and then working on my trauma, getting rid of my addiction actually by using EMDR therapy, working on healing that with therapy, and addressing that, because a lot of times, for those struggling, like, this is stored in our body, and dealing with that too, like using Pilates and movement, stretching to get rid of some of that trauma stuck in my body. So addressing all of these things at first, those were my first steps in healing. I've since learned more about detoxification, getting the right lab work done, getting the right test done, an ANA or a CRP for autoimmunity, getting a full thyroid panel, not just your TSH, because that's just measuring your pituitary function, not your thyroid function. A lot of people aren't getting their antibodies tested. All of these things that I learned, and a lot of those with ADHD specifically, have trouble detoxing. A lot of them have genetic polymorphisms causing the inability to detox. So focusing on detox pathways like infrared sauna, castor oil packs, Epsom salt baths, rebounding on a mini trampoline to detox that lymphatic system. And then, going about a gut healing approach and going in and doing GI map stool testing, hormone testing, any of these different types of tests that will tell us what's going on. Do we have candida? Do we have, overgrowth microbes that are causing a lot of issues? Do we have parasites? Do we have worms? It's going to tell you a lot of different things. Like if you have good bacteria, not enough good bacteria, or not enough bad, you have too much overgrowth bacteria. It's going to tell you all different yeasts and many different things in this GI map. And so going about that and binding those toxins, replenishing the gut flora, and adding in foods again, because a lot of times those food sensitivities don't have to be lifelong. I mean, I couldn't eat a lot of foods, and now I can eat all of them, except for I still don't do gluten and dairy, but I was able to add back even, like, I couldn't eat tomatoes, like I couldn't eat eggs. Like, there were so many things that I like couldn't process anymore. And so teaching how to eliminate the inflammatory, add in nutrients where there's deficiencies, and then dismantle the gut dysfunction and bring back in foods, bring back in nourishment, and focusing on the stress, the trauma, the sleep. If you're not sleeping, and most of us mamas are not sleeping. You know, I didn't sleep for 2 years, and I got even more messed up again. Like, I did my healing, and then I had a baby with special needs, cystic fibrosis, didn't sleep for 2 years, and like that stress, that lack of sleep. There's a reason sleep deprivation is a form of punishment. Anyways, I could go on, but that's kind of how I navigated that. And I'm always learning. I'm learning something new every day, and that's what I want for my clients. And what I want for mamas struggling, for those struggling with ADHD, autoimmunity, hormonal imbalances. I mean, and we're just inundated by even EMFs right now, electromagnetic fields, how to harmonize those, how to, help with environmental toxins. There's a lot of stuff going on that we're just not aware of.
Totally. And one of the things that I really respect about the work that you do, or how you work with people, is that you do look at the whole picture. And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't know is that stress is inflammatory, or that trauma is in the body. People don't know that. And a lot of times you choose a path and one doesn't look at the other, right? We're just looking at diet and nutrition, but we're not looking at stress and trauma. Or, I'm getting through the myth of normal right now, which is all about how our environment is, in essence, toxic and traumatic. And this is why we have all these mental health issues. Or here was a statistic that blew me away with the autoimmune. I think that we are just like scratching the surface on this, but in this book, he says that 70 to 80% of the autoimmune cases are women, because of the stress and the condition that we carry, which really kind of pairs with my whole thing, which is, as modern working moms, we're just doing more and more and more. And that's paralleling a rise in our mental health issues. We're just carrying this stress, and it's becoming ailments in our body. And so these things that we talk about, whether it is movement or writing out your things or setting boundaries or cleaning up your gut health, all these things do make a difference, but the mind and the body are definitely connected. And I am so excited that we finally have science coming through to back that, because it seems like that's something that you've kind of always known and believed intuitively too, but also now we have the science. And so when you're working with clients, because you just shared like a bunch of tests, are those things that you put people through? So like, take me as an example, 42, stressed, yes, sleep is okay, but my energy is really, really low. What is it like to work with you? What are you going to walk me through in terms of testing and things that I'm clearly not getting with my general practitioner? Because according to them, my blood work is fine and everything should be fine, but it's not.
First, I'd ask you, have you had your hormones tested? And I'd ask to see your blood work to see if I could look at it functionally and not pathologically. Because a lot of times the pathological range is the range of everyone nearest us and like in our vicinity. And that range is based off of the mean of everyone in our area. And most people are sick. So it's not really a great judge of like what's optimal. So there's a functional and a pathological range. So I would look at those. And then I would make sure that you got the right blood work done regarding thyroid. And then I always recommend stool testing first. But since you are in your 40s, I would recommend getting your hormones tested, because you could have perimenopause symptoms and probably dealing with some estrogen dominant symptoms, because our progesterone and our estrogen both drop after our 30s and continue to drop, but our progesterone drops more, and it's the estrogen dominance. So a lot of times they'll just prescribe like more estrogen, and I'm like, but that's not the issue. Yes, we lose estrogen and we lose progesterone, but it's really that the balance of the two used to be like this, and now it's slanted. So I would also do a full client intake. I would get all of your history, timeline, history, medical, as well as trauma. And I'd start to see what happened right before you started feeling your worst. And I'd start to put the pieces together and seeing, I mean, there's so many symptoms that are on our client intake form, even like itching, like, you know, if you're scratching a lot or itching, or if you have high eosinophils on your blood work, you could have parasites. Like, there's so many things that we would look at first before even going in to make sure that we have the right, you know, data, I guess, and really building a big picture and really building a sympathetic relationship. I work closely with Cody Giovanetti, which is one of my good friends. We went to high school together at Sundar Wellness, and she's a dietitian, a functional dietitian. And so we work together to offer our clients GI map stool testing, which is going to show the full picture. You don't get this kind of testing for like H. pylori, for candida, for overgrowth microbes, parasites, worms, all these different things that could be causing a lot of different energy issues. But also, I would probably think that your cortisol and stress is definitely affecting your hormones. And that we do hormone Dutch testing, which will tell us about your cortisol levels and your hormones and how you're, you know, detoxing your hormones and what pathways they're going down and all of these things instead of just measuring your hormones. So those are different types of tests that we offer at Sundar Wellness. But also, we start with a food mood journal the first week, and we build a routine. I start with a morning routine, and I give you a food journal. I don't change anything food-wise. I might add in a couple of things morning routine-wise that have to do with regulating your nervous system, increasing stomach acid, something like that. And then I would, which we actually have too little stomach acid, not too much stomach acid, which everyone thinks. We need stomach acid to be able to absorb B12 and iron, which is energy. And a lot of us are depleted in that, especially over the age of 30, because of depleted nutrients and minerals in our soils, stress, EMFs, all these different things in our environment. And I would see how you're feeling. The food mood journal is about, if you're not pooping, you're not excreting waste. So I'd see how your bowel movements are through the day. I would see your mood. Is it a headache? Are you feeling overly full? Are you anxious after you eat this? Are you sad? Are you having gas, bloating? Any of these types of things, our body is trying to tell us something. And so kind of just learning to pay attention to our bodies, what we're putting in and how we're tolerating. Because you want to eliminate the inflammatory first so that you can heal the gut. You can always add back in later, but it is important to kind of even the playing field to reduce that inflammation, whether that be stress, trauma, food sensitivities, and then adding in minerals and foods because we're nutrient deprived. What is it? And I would have the right, like a lab wish list would give you what minerals and vitamins to test as well. Because, you know, they talk about testing, not just guessing and like, you know, giving you a bunch of supplements. There are specific supplements that I do love for everybody. I love a good cod liver oil because it has vitamin A, vitamin D, and our omega-3s. We're all like inundated with inflammation. Mm-hmm. And a good probiotic. Dependent upon each person though, like if you have mast cell activation, you don't need to be on certain probiotics. And there's just everybody's so bio-individual. So seeing that food mood journal, building that relationship, that's how I would start. And making sure that we really, and just knowing everything about what's going on with you lifestyle-wise, like in your family, stress-wise, like managing that first. Because it doesn't matter how much we do diet-wise if this other stuff is just too much. Like our amygdala in our brain is like too much, too fast. Like I'm not going to do any of it. Like that's why diets don't work.
That's right. So. We go into shutdown mode for sure. And, you know, on this podcast, I try to simplify things for mamas because the sheer overwhelm of going down these paths and figuring it out shuts us down to take no action whatsoever. And then things don't get better. But I want to hear more about that the brain-gut connection, because we are discovering that 90% of our serotonin, which is the hormone that makes us feel good, is created in our guts. And so will you just speak on that to the listener who's maybe even newer to this conversation? What is Why are we talking about a healthy gut? How does that affect our mental health and our overall wellness? And what are some things we could be looking out for?
Our gut and our brain are connected. Just like you said, 90% of our serotonin is in our gut. 70% of our immune system is in our gut, And actually, most of our DNA is microbial. And so our gut health, we're actually like made of more microbes like DNA than our own DNA is what I'm trying to say.
Wow.
So our microbes matter. Having enough good gut bacteria, if we don't have enough, basically we can't get rid of inflammation. We're not going to be able to create neurotransmitters. We're not going to be able to create hormones. Our body's not having the right conversation with our brain. We have a vagal nerve from our, brain to our gut, which is going to help our parasympathetic nervous system. We need that to be able to rest and digest. If we're not activating our parasympathetic rest and digest, we're not digesting our food. And this is going to create more inflammation. So what we put in our mouth and our gut is going to affect what's going on in our gut and our brain. Basically antibiotics, things like that, NSAIDs, ibuprofen, Tylenol, a lot of these actually alter the gut microbiome. And that's going to affect how our gut communicates with our brain. And actually our gut communicates more with our brain than our brain to our gut. So it really is that gut-brain connection. Yeah. I don't know if that was answering the question.
Yeah. So our gut is basically our second brain. And
Yeah.
it sounds like the thing that's really fucking that up is inflammation. And again, inflammation is stress. It's also not like having an influx of hormones, but it's also the foods that we're eating, right? Like dairy, gluten,
So I can talk
alcohol.
about dairy and gluten real quick if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, God, I am really resisting having to remove those bad boys from my diet, but go ahead. Sell me on this.
So the reason that gluten and dairy, so we all have leaky gut basically these days due to toxins in our environment, due to just stress and all this inflammation that we're speaking of. But the two proteins that easily make their way through the tight gap junctions in our small intestine are gliadin and gluten and casein and dairy. And they easily make their way through those not so tight gap junctions. And when they do, they go into our bloodstream as full peptides instead of amino acids. And our body doesn't recognize them. So then our body labels them as foreign and labels anything that looks similar as foreign as well. And when that happens, it starts attacking anything that looks similar in protein. And our thyroid even looks similar to the gliadin protein. So that's what self-attack tissue is. That's what autoimmunity is. And a lot of times there are cross-reactive foods to gluten. One of them is dairy. And so many people with gluten sensitivity have dairy sensitivity. Also, 70% of Americans' pee now has glyphosate in it. And this is because of Roundup that is sprayed on our crops right before harvest. And they started introducing that in the 1980s, I think. And since then, the rise in autoimmunity has skyrocketed. And it's sprayed on our major crops, like wheat, corn, and soy. Those are the three of the biggest ones. And even organic now, because of the recycling of the rainwater, really, it's kind of in everything. You hear stories of people going to Italy, going to overseas, being able to eat gluten, being able to eat dairy, and not having as many problems with it. There's a reason. They're not using Roundup. They're not using glyphosate, and they aren't putting seed oils in all of their food and a lot of different preservatives in the foods. These are causing our guts to become even more leaky. And also the way that they're processed today. Because processed proteins, I actually talked to Dr. Catherine Reed. She specializes in autism. She's a biochemist, and she studied the proteins because she was trying to heal her daughter from autism. And she learned that a lot of these different proteins, specifically gliadin and casein and dairy, when they are processed, they become unbound glutamate, which is excitatory to our glutamate receptors in our brain and our gut, and they act like MSG. So they actually are excitatory, which is why they taste so good and can become hyperpalatable. Mm-hmm. And that we love them so much. Mm-hmm. But also, yes, they can become excitatory. And so removing processed protein. So like say like I did a post recently about whey protein. Because it's the way it's hydrolyzed, you're causing that protein to become unbound, and it acts like MSG on our neurotransmitters, on our glutamate receptors in our gut and our brain. So like isolated soy protein, isolate, you'll see that like listed as an ingredient. Like when they isolate a protein, when they hydrolyze a protein, basically what I'm saying to do is eat whole foods. But there's so much processing these days, and that's causing a lot of these inadvertent MSG acting. And so when she removed a lot of these isolated proteins from her daughter's diet, her autistic symptoms went away. And so that was like really amazing to me. And I just know that so many of my clients, like when they remove dairy, their fatigue is gone. They're bloating. They're a lot of times, you'll see a lot of kids with ear infections, chronic ear infections, like removing dairy. Like a lot of it's mucus, which creates mucus. So you'll see a lot of sinus issues, certain drainage things that you just wouldn't realize. So these are, obviously you can try to add back in raw dairy later that's not pasteurized, that's not processed, and see if you can tolerate it. But I do believe in eliminating the inflammatory first so that you can heal your gut, and then you can, attempt adding back in unprocessed forms. I think some people can tolerate like traditional, like einkorn or really, really some forms of wheat sometimes, but it is a harder one for our bodies to digest, and it's caused a lot more autoimmunity. And I do believe a lot of it has to do with the glyphosate that's been sprayed on our crops.
Wow. And so how do we avoid that? How do we avoid this stuff because it feels like it's everywhere. It's overwhelming, right? And as a busy working mom, like, do I have time to prepare whole foods for every meal? Honestly, fuck no, I don't. It's like we know that that's the right thing and the healthiest for us, but what's like a small step in the right direction that's manageable that we could take to protect ourselves and our kiddos from this Roundup is basically what it is, right?
Buying organic.
Okay.
Buying grass-fed, pasture-raised that's just an addition, but I could go into that. It's the seed oils that are in all of our foods. They're inflammatory. So I would recommend definitely looking at buying, there's a Dirty Dozen list. So like looking at what foods to buy organic, because a lot of them are sprayed. And, even with I would definitely say buying organic, cleaning up fluoride in your water. But yes, gluten and dairy, they are hard ones to give up. I get it completely. But dyes, preservatives, if it has more than 5 ingredients, your body probably doesn't recognize it. So starting to buy more foods on Thrive Market, where they have coconut oil chips that I buy for my kids without some of the seed oils, because we do have that omega-6-to-3 ratio. So wanting to bring in good fats, good omega-3s, because in America our ratio is now 40-to-1 instead of 1-to-1. It's supposed to be 1-to-1 for every omega-6. There's one omega-3. So eliminating adding in more coconut oil, avocado oil, grass-fed butter, ghee, instead of canola oil, vegetable oil, sunflower oil, these different seed oils that are really inflammatory, and then adding in more good fats is really helpful as well. But just looking at if it has more than 5 ingredients, looking at that, I can also, offer up I'll send you a free list of different, my favorite processed go-to foods that I send to my clients. Awesome. I give them a lot of different swaps. I think swaps are really important. But, I do think it's important for the education, for everyone to know about the inflammatory, as annoying as it is, because it's just very frustrating that I can't wait to go to Italy and just eat all the gluten, but I cannot tolerate it here at all.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that all the time. You go to Italy and France, and you can basically eat bread and pasta and not gain weight and not feel bloated and not fart all day. What is that even about? But I think what you're really alluding to that could be that first step is starting to build awareness around what you're putting in your body and how it's making you feel, or even awareness around the ingredients. We cannot change what we're not aware of. So maybe the entry point is for you, mama, to build some awareness and just start looking at ingredients. and noticing how you feel, or noticing your kiddos' behaviors if they've had like a heavy sugar or a heavy dye or a heavy whatever. And that awareness can then maybe get you to a second step. But when I was nursing my daughter, I had to cut out dairy, soy, nuts, and eggs because of the inflammatory piece, which was also all the seed oils and all of it. And I gotta tell you, like, it was hard to find foods that didn't have all that stuff in it. And it was very eye-opening for me, the way that I had been eating, the cost of convenience that has on us. And I just started reading all the ingredients, and it's like, God, there's freaking soy in everything. It's just like a filler, right? Or seed oil in soybean oil. That shit is in everything. But it forced me to cook without, find restaurants and replacements. So I would love, the Dirty Dozen list would be amazing. We could link that in the show notes. So it's like, don't feel like you need to swap out all your food, but start with the Dirty Dozen. And it's like meat and produce, right? Get that stuff right. But also the swaps that you can make over time. Because listen, even if this information is overwhelming, if it's going to help us feel better, It probably is worth it, my loves.
Another thing I would say, that's an easy thing, focus on fat, fiber, and protein at every meal.
Mm-hmm.
Because you want to be balancing your blood sugar. Blood sugar is going to, ups and downs in the blood sugar, that's going to lead to those emotional, exhaustion, tired. Eating fat, fiber, and protein is going to slow the digestion of the sugars, slow the digestion of the carbs. It's not going to go straight to the bloodstream, overwhelm our insulin receptors, and like cause those spikes. And it's also going to be less likely to store as fat because you're not spiking the blood glucose. There's not too much too fast. This goes for fruit or sugar or anything. Adding in fat and protein with that so that your body slows that digestion and you're not having those peaks and valleys. And even walking after a meal, getting outside, meditating. There's so many different things that you can add in. But I do feel like a lot of people don't want to talk about the food sometimes, and because it can be so overwhelming. But I know the difference that it makes. So I do love giving the information.
Yeah, it's important. And information is knowledge and power. And, we are sharing a lot of information today. You don't have to take something, you don't have to do something with everything we're sharing, but we can't be in the dark anymore. We can't be in the dark anymore because not only is it making us sick, but I think we have a real responsibility as humans to make better decisions for life on this planet, including the planet, and continuing to utilize harmful neurotoxins in our food and in our dirt is like, why has that become okay? It's not. And so I think there's a real role and responsibility for us to educate ourselves so we can drive some of that change, because none of us, no matter how tired we are just cool with the fact that our food is making us sick. It's not okay.
Mm. And, there's other little things too that you can do, like filtering your water from fluoride, which can be like a neurotoxin, or, just there's little steps that you can make that make a big difference. And, looking at endocrine disruptors in our products, like, swapping. Each time you buy something new, maybe buy like a cleaner product. Mm-hmm. That doesn't have like, as many different things in it ingredient wise, because even perfumes, candles, air fresheners, a lot of these are messing with our hormones. Mm-hmm. And I know nobody wants to hear that about their pumpkin spice latte candle, but it
smells so good, girl. Nothing smells as good as those Bath and Body Works toxic candles.
I know. I used to love them. I loved them, but now, because I removed a lot of them, I use essential oils now. I removed a lot of them. Now when I smell something, like it just really affects me because like I don't use it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, whoa.
Wow, I know. And shout out to Henry Rose Perfumes. Have you heard of that brand or tried any of their product?
I haven't.
Oh my gosh. So they're a truly clean fragrance, and it does like a little personality questionnaire to populate. So like mine came out Queens and Monsters.
That's cool. I love that.
Which is So fitting, queens and monsters. And I love it. And it's not overdone. It's not too potent, but it's also healthy. But yeah, lots of things that we can swap out. And I think as we get older, we just have to face the fact that our endocrine systems, our hormonal balances are very sensitive. So these things are wreaking havoc on us, whether we want to admit it or not. And it's about making these little minor changes over time. But I think in looking at the big picture of all of these things, I would say sleep. Like if you're struggling, sleep has got to be probably one of the most important things. Trauma and stress in the body. And then we can look at like the foods and then toxins and all of those things and how they're all playing a role together. But if you're not sleeping, sleep is so huge. Why is sleep so big from where you're standing?
So that's how we detox our hormones, detox excess estrogen. That's when our liver detoxes. So if you're waking up at 2 to 3 in the morning, your liver, you're probably having some liver issues. This can tell you a lot about when you're waking up, when those certain organs detox. But if you go to sleep by 10 also, your cortisol spikes after 10 o'clock and it's harder to go to bed. It's also going to help you maintain your blood sugar because you're getting more sleep. If you have no sleep, you're going to have increased ghrelin, which is going to increase your hunger hormone, and decreased leptin, which is the inability to get full, which can lead to even more insulin resistance, lack of sleep, which is, it explains so much, like why you're more hungry because you're not sleeping as well. And that is, we don't want to have our cortisol spike. So it's going to help us manage our overall adrenal fatigue. It's going to help us manage our hormones because, again, cortisol increases, our thyroid hormone decreases, our hormones decrease, our neurotransmitters decrease. All of these different things are going to be affected just by our sleep. So sleep is huge. It's probably the first thing that I ask. People aren't sleeping.
Same.
There's definitely something that we've got to be doing there. Are you drinking enough water?
Mm-hmm.
Water's huge. Hydration. If you're not hydrating, you don't have enough stomach acid. If you're not, are you pooping? Like, these are big questions. Like, if you're not pooping, you're not excreting waste, there's something going on. Like, you need to be pooping 1 to 3 times daily. And it needs to be, like, in a long form, not in little clumps, not floating. Like, these things, our body's telling us something.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at small things first, doing that food mood journal, like, just seeing how you feel. Like, how am I feeling after I eat this? Little things like that can just give you a big eye-opener about, okay, well, maybe that didn't really work. Like, I know one client will be like, well, every time I eat green beans, I have bunny poos. Like, that's, you shouldn't have green beans. So,
What's wrong with bunny poops? What's so funny about that, or is just ironic, is with our kids, we're very attuned to their basic needs. Are they sleeping? Are they eating? Are they getting enough hydration? Are they getting enough play and nature? And we're analyzing the shit out of their turds. But we don't do that for ourselves. But it's like we need to treat our bodies with the same care and attention and attunement as we do our kids, because we're paying attention to those bowel movements for them, but we're just like skipping over that for ourselves.
Oh yeah, I'm always looking at my kid's diaper.
Yeah.
Well, he did not tolerate that. I need to not feed him that again.
I love it. So one last quick question, then we'll wrap up here. The cortisol spiking, that's a huge hot topic right now. What are some things you would recommend we do either during our day or in the evening to prevent it from spiking when we're supposed to be sleeping?
So I definitely would, fat, fiber, protein, big one.
Okay.
And even when you have adrenal fatigue, adding in minerals. A good mineral complex is really great. I love Designs for Health mineral complex. Adding in electrolytes throughout the day, because a lot of us are lacking in minerals and we need minerals, and good quality salt for our adrenal fatigue. So adding in good Himalayan salt to our foods and getting enough electrolytes. Salt dissolved into water actually is electrolytes. And eating a little bit of protein before bed actually can help, not like right before bed, but like making sure that you're eating something that's going to keep you satiated and full can help with adrenal fatigue. But again, balancing that blood sugar is going to help with the cortisol, because when you're blood sugar's imbalanced, your body's stressed. So managing your stress the best way you can too, drinking enough water, getting outside first thing in the morning, meditating, doing your morning lemon water to increase stomach acid, 10 to 15 minutes before eating anything else. Just allowing your body to get into a state of rest and digest and activating that parasympathetic nervous system, the vagal nerve, is going to be really key. There's so many different mindfulness techniques. I even did a neurosomatic training recently. I'll have to connect you to Elizabeth Kristoff. She's great with brain-based wellness. She teaches you some tools. There's so many different things that you can help. But focusing on that stress and boundaries, setting boundaries, and what is it in my life right now that can go? Something's got to give. I need to focus on myself. Do I need more time alone? Do I need more connection? What is it that I need to help support myself? Do I need to go back to therapy? Do I need to, just all of these different things that are going to reduce stress. Again, if you don't reduce the stressors first and then you try to add in more stuff on top of it, you can't do it all. It's too much. So starting small, adding in, and then starting to maybe be okay, this isn't making me feel good. Let me eliminate that. And then you do something else. That's what I always do with my clients. That's why you don't ever just be throw them to the wolves. So I hope that was a good enough answer for that.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful reminder too of when we talk about boundaries and asking for help and decluttering, getting things off your to-do list or off your plate. It's not just a woo-woo buzz topic. It's truly essential for our mental and emotional and therefore physical well-being. So I love that we ended with that reminder of what can you let go of to create space for taking a step for your health in the right direction. So thank you so much for that. And let's close with, where can our community find you, work with you, all the things? Tell us where we can connect.
So you can find me at Audrey Stimpson, my name on Instagram, AudreyStimpson. And then same name for my website, audreystimpson.com. You can book a free consultation there, and we can chat all the things. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Yeah, and you guys definitely give her a follow on Instagram, because I feel like she puts out a lot of really informative content. Every day I'm learning something oh, cool, fluoride's a problem too. But also what you can do about it. And I feel like you have a fun, playful, but very to the point, education style that I really appreciate. So a lot of great information coming out. But thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today, Audrey. I just may be signing up for a free consultation so we can get to the bottom of this mood thing and this energy thing.
I'll send you that food mood journal just in a lab wish list after the call.
All right. I love it. And to the audience, thank you guys for tuning in today. We will see you same next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to the Unperfected Pod. I hope this episode helped you feel a little less alone and a little more inspired to be you. If you like what we're doing here, I would so appreciate that you subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. If you do, share the episode on Instagram and tag me at Brooke Jean Unperfected to enter to win a 1-to-1 laser coaching session. Also, feel free to join me in my private Facebook community, Mommy's Mental Health Matters, where we continue the conversation. Thanks again for being here, and see you in next week's episode.